CNN's Barbara Starr with the breaking news. Barbara, what do you know?
Well, Don, what sources are telling us is that U.S. Special Operations Forces were part of a mission to go after a suspected al-shabaab leader in a town deep in southern Somalia. This occurred over the last 24 hours. They are offering very few details because at this point, what is unclear is whether or not they were able to get to their target, potentially either capture, most likely kill the target, before the Special Operations Forces withdrew from the village. So it's to be very clear to our viewers, it is unclear at this point what the outcome of the mission was. Said to be a target with the al-shabaab, that al-Qaeda-linked group that is said to be responsible for that terrible, deadly attack on the shopping mall in Kenya just several days ago. The coastline of Somalia is really key to all of this. U.S. commandos operate regularly in several locations throughout the Horn of Africa, both to the north of Somalia and to the south. They have been in and out of Somalia on covert secret missions over the years, many times going after al-Qaeda suspects in Somalia, killing and capturing them. With that coastline, it is very likely it was Navy SEALs, not being openly talked about just yet, because for the Navy SEALs, it is so easy for them to get in and out of some of these very rural areas, come in by helicopter, come in by boat, conduct their raids, and move out very quickly. So it looks like another case where they went into very dangerous territory in Somalia to go after a very particular target, Don.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that when you said go into very dangerous territory? How high a risk would this mission, this Navy SEAL mission, have been?
Well, look, I mean, in this part of Somalia, there are militant factions, fundamentalists, al-shabaab, others that certainly do not take kindly to seeing American helicopters or foreign helicopters of any sort come after them. The Kenyans, for example, have been operating in Somalia for some time and constantly come under attack and fire at various points. Somalia is a very rough neighborhood, a very rough territory. You have a lot of fighters with AK-47s, with explosives, with some potential for surface-to-air missile launches, grenade launchers, that kind of thing. So Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces have been into Somalia in recent years. They come in very heavily armed. They come in usually in helicopter gunships or small boats, heavily armed. Their firepower would be very significant, but once they get on the ground, once they get into these small towns or villages, they have to move very fast because they've got to get to their target, do what they've come to do, and get out of there, because there are so many people that would oppose this that could then begin to assemble and start firing at them. They have a lot of concerns about civilian casualties, but really, once they get on the ground, what they want to avoid is getting into some situation where they've got a lot of people coming after them with those AK-47 style weapons. So their big move when they go into these situations is to get in and get out. Don?
All right, Barbara, we're just getting this information. Barbara, can you sit tight for a little bit? I may come back to you. I want to get now to our national security analyst, Peter Bergen. Peter's on the phone, but I want to repeat this for our viewers. There's breaking news this hour. CNN has confirmed that U.S. Navy SEALs may have killed a major terror chief, al-Shabaab's leader in Somalia. That is the group, as Barbara Starr has said from the Pentagon there, that claimed it carried out the deadly terror attack on Kenya's Westgate Mall just last month. Peter Bergen, tell us what you know about this.
Well, you know, al-shabaab, which is the group responsible for the attack on the Kenya Mall, put itself in the United States targets for two reasons. One, in 2012, it formally allied itself with al-Qaeda, which was, in fact, not a very smart move, because it's a lot easier for the president to order the kind of operation that we're now confirming if this is an actual al-Qaeda affiliate rather than just some other jihadi group. Secondarily, of course, there were Americans injured in the attack on the Kenyan Mall, and certainly it was the intent of the group to attack the mall because it was a place where Westerners congregated. So it is not entirely surprising that very quickly the U.S. Navy SEALs would have done this operation. They're very comfortable operating in Somalia. They've done similar operations against leaders of al-Qaeda in Somalia. They, of course, rescued Captain Richard Phillips when he was taken hostage by Somali pirates in 2009. And it's an environment in which they operate fairly comfortably. But as Barbara pointed out, of course, there are risks always in these operations.
So what does this mean for the war, so to speak, on terrorism in the world?
Well, I mean, I think al-shabaab, you can interpret the attack on the mall as really a desperate bid for relevance. This is a group that controlled much of southern Somalia 2 years ago and has been really dealt a number of military defeats by the Kenyan army and other African army units, as well as with the help of the United States. Terrorism is a lot easier to do than running an effective insurgency as they were a couple of years ago. So this may be sort of a little bit of a nail in the coffin for the group if indeed it turns out that their leader has been killed, as appears it might be the case right now.
In comparison to other terror groups, al-shabaab, al-Qaeda, and so on, how does al-shabaab rank here?
Well, I mean, they changed their ranking pretty significantly by attacking, a target in Kenya, which had numerous Westerners were killed, Americans were injured. They'd never successfully attacked against a Western target, as it were, before. They'd certainly tried to attack in Denmark. They tried to kill a cartoonist who had done a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad that was deemed offensive. That attack didn't work. So, I mean, the Kenyan attack put them on a whole different level. And as I say, it would be very easy for the president to order this operation just as a legal matter, because once you announce you're part of al-Qaeda and you also attack or try to attack American targets, you put yourself in a very different category than you had previously.
Peter, stand by. Barbara Starr, are you still there? Okay. So, Barbara, again, I just want to reiterate for our people who may just be tuning in, we'll get Barbara back. The breaking news this hour on CNN, as you are watching these pictures, these are really foul pictures that are playing out. But CNN has confirmed that U.S. Navy SEALs may have killed a major terror chief, al-Shabaab's leader, in Somalia. We're following this breaking news story right now with our Pentagon correspondent and also with our Peter Bergen, who is our national security analyst. And I want to tell you that this group is the same group that claimed responsibility for carrying out that deadly terror attack on Kenya's Westgate Mall last month. So, Peter, let's continue on in this vein until we get our Barbara Starr back. Barbara's getting more information now. So then what happens if they have killed this leader? Then what is next? Obviously, it hampers the progress of this group. If one of their top lieutenants is no longer there, what does it mean for al-Shabaab?
It's hard to say. Killing Osama bin Laden, didn't end al-Qaeda, but if you kill a lot of bin Laden's lieutenants, as has happened in CIA drone strikes in Pakistan, you've got a case where the bench is it's hard to replace people who are in their 30s or 40s who have a lot of experience. And certainly with al-Qaeda Central, a policy of decapitating the leadership, I think, has been pretty devastating to the actual al-Qaeda Central group in Pakistan. And similarly with Shabaab, if you take out, not just a leader, but multiple leaders. And in fact, one of the leaders of the group was an American citizen who was in an internal dispute, was killed probably by Shabaab itself in September. So you're seeing that the group is losing ground militarily. It's having some internecine kind of quarrels that have led to the death of one of its leaders. And now you have this special operations operation, which seems to have been at least somewhat effective. We don't know exactly what happened yet, but it seems that one of the leaders may have been killed.
All right, Peter Bergen, stand by. Again, we're going to continue to follow this breaking news that U.S. forces went after al-Shabaab's leader, possibly linked to the Kenya attack. We're getting more details now. Our Pentagon correspondent's working on it, our national security analyst, Peter Bergen, working on it as well as the worldwide resources of CNN. We'll be back right after this break with the breaking news. The breaking news here on CNN is that U.S. Special Forces involved in a mission to take out a top al-shabaab leader, a terror group leader. Barbara Starr with a major update on this story. Barbara, what do you have?
Just into us now, Don, a U.S. official is confirming, indeed, as you said before, it was a team of U.S. Navy SEALs that went into this town in southern Somalia. But, and this is a big situation here, the Navy SEALs had to withdraw from the town before they could confirm that they had killed the target they were going after, the person they were trying to get, the al-shabaab leader. And we are told by a senior U.S. official the Navy SEALs had to withdraw because they came into what he calls a very hostile environment. They came under fire in this town. And he says the Navy SEALs made what he calls a prudent decision to withdraw from the town rather than engage in further combat and risk causing some number of civilian casualties. That's what they're telling us right now. They do not believe at this point any U.S. Navy SEALs were either killed. There's no word on that. There's no indication of that, or any of them suffered any wounds in this gunfight. We don't know about Somalis on the ground wounded or killed. We don't know if the target they were going after was killed because this gunfight apparently erupted. Navy SEALs go in pretty heavily armed. They don't usually get overwhelmed to the point of needing to withdraw in a gunfight unless they're in an environment with a large number of civilians and they don't want to get involved in some potential incident of causing those civilian casualties. So I think we're going to learn much more in the coming days about what exactly the Navy SEALs encountered in southern Somalia. Very rough piece of territory down there, but they could not fully complete their mission. They couldn't find if they had killed the man they were going after because of this gunfight, this hostile environment situation, Don.
And Barbara, you know, this brings to mind for me just exactly what we deal with here in the United States. There are people who are overseas fighting for our freedom all the time, fighting against terrorism all the time, and we don't really know about what's going on. And this happens without our knowledge until something like this occurs, where a leader may have been taken out, or they're involved in some fight and they have to retreat. We don't really know about it.
That is so right, Don. I think the members of special operations units would tell you, if they could, that they are involved every day around the world. Much of what they do, actually, hopefully most days, is working with other militaries around the world, working in more peaceful situations, but very often, as you just said, they are involved in anti-terrorism, counterterrorism missions, basically going after bad guys and doing it in the shadows so often, not getting any public acknowledgement for what they do. And, you know, I think it's really important, as you just said, to remember these people and their families, their spouses, their children, often really making that sacrifice of not even being able to talk publicly about what their loved ones are doing in such dangerous parts of the world. Don?
Barbara, can you talk to us as well about another mission in Africa?
You're talking about what's been going on in Libya today, I take it?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, I'm just making sure, because there's been a lot going on throughout the day.
There are a lot of missions, right?
Yeah. Well, let's step through this one very carefully as well. Our Justice reporter, Evan Perez, has confirmed that an al-Qaeda leader named Anusa Libby has been captured in Libya, in North Africa. This, as Evan has been reporting, this man is a member of al-Qaeda. He had gone to Libya some time ago and was suspected of really setting up the al-Qaeda operation in Libya. He is on the most wanted list, the U.S. Justice Department offering a reward of up to $5 million for him. What we have been able to confirm in the last few minutes from a senior U.S. official is that, again, U.S. Special Forces, according to this senior official, and he knows this is being reported, U.S. Special Forces were involved in the capture of this man inside Libya, this man al-Libi. Not clear at the moment what his exact location is. Very few details available about exactly how this operation went down, but I think it's a real indication of what you and I are talking about here tonight. Hundreds of miles away at two different ends of the African continent, U.S. Special Forces in action going against terrorism targets that the U.S. has wanted to get very badly, Don.
Barbara, so speak to me about, and I asked Peter Bergen this question, what does this mean now? We talked about, you were just talking about al-Qaeda here. Can we go back to al-Shabaab and this latest bit of breaking news that we have? What does this mean for al-Shabaab?
Well, you know, I think we've all seen over the last decade plus years that, you know, they go after these various targets and they feel they really have the evidence to go after them, that they're involved in terrorist activities. But does that really end the terrorist cell, the terrorist organization? 12 years later, 15 years later, we see al-Qaeda morphing into various organizations around the world. And in fact, al-Shabaab, the al-Shabaab group in Somalia, is an al-Qaeda linked group that has pledged a certain amount of loyalty to al-Qaeda. Many groups in Libya, groups in Syria. What you're dealing with around the world these days since 9/11 is, you know, Al-Qaeda 2.0 is what a lot of people call it. Back in 2001, you had Osama bin Laden, you had the group of men around him. They have largely been dealt with, but you see the eruption of these Al-Qaeda organizations throughout the Middle East, throughout Africa, mainly in areas where governance is so poor, where people are not looked after by their governments, and there's a lot of poverty, and there's a lot of ability for them to recruit constantly a new population of young men to their movements.
Right.
Getting this al-Shabaab guy, it'll do something for a while, but I don't think anybody's predicting it's the end of al-Shabaab, al-Qaeda up in Libya, or the al-Qaeda groups in Syria. Don?
As you mentioned, special operations are working around the world every single day, and there are missions being carried out. But the reason that these two are breaking news, they're significant because they're such high-profile people that they're going after and organizations. So talk to me about what else could be going on, why these two are so significant, Barbara. And then I want to get to Peter Bergen after.
Well, you know, I think one of the things that is so significant for everyone to think about is, you know, it doesn't take a lot of imagination, if you will, to figure out the risks that U.S. forces are at when they go on these missions. It's just a simple fact. They have to gather intelligence for weeks ahead of time to know what they're going into. They have to know where their targets are. They have to know, are they going to go in by helicopter gunship? Are they going in by aircraft? What kind of opposition they're going to face on the ground? Who may be shooting at them as they land? All of these things. So planning these missions, very secretive, very covert. We never hear about them ahead of time as they are planning them. But everybody should probably be very aware that this goes on all the time. And you can only imagine, I suppose, what missions might be being planned now. We all know that for the last year, the U.S. has been wanting very much to go after the suspects that were responsible for the attack on the Benghazi diplomatic compound last September 11th. We've seen no missions to do that, you know, but it's very clear the president has said he wants justice delivered to those people. So that is still out there, going after Ayman al-Zawahiri, the leader of al-Qaeda in Pakistan, who's holed up there. That is still out there. So there's a lot still going on. I think there's no question about that. But does any of it really change when you have things like the Boston bombing attack, when two men decided to look up, apparently on the internet, how to make a bomb out of a pressure cooker? You have a new form of terrorism that all the military missions around the world in the shadows aren't really going to get to, when people can learn these types of things right off the internet, Don.
Very well said. Two Americans, by the way, Barbara. These aren't people who are overseas. Barbara Starr, stand by. More in our breaking news. There are special forces involved in two operations today, one in Libya, one in Somalia, going after very high-profile terrorists. Our security analyst, Peter Bergen, weighs in on the other side of this break. Breaking news here on CNN. Please pay attention to major developments in the fight against terrorism here. CNN has confirmed that U.S. Special Forces went on a mission in Somalia, went after al-Shabaab's leader, possibly linked to that Kenya Mall attack just a few weeks ago. That is a group that claimed that they carried out that deadly attack in Kenya's Westgate Mall last month. Also, the other breaking news story here, the al-Qaeda operative responsible for the 1998 bombing on U.S. embassies may have been captured. Abu Anas al-Libi has topped the most wanted lists for years. He joined al-Qaeda soon after its founding and is considered a senior member of al-Qaeda. I want to get to CNN's Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr. We want to talk about both of these big stories. Let's talk first about the latest one now, the mission in Somalia, Barbara.
Well, Don, what we know is that the Navy SEALs went into this small town in southern Somalia to try and capture a leader in the al-Shabaab network. This is the al-Qaeda-linked group in Somalia, said to be responsible for so many attacks, including the attack on the shopping mall in Kenya that we all watched unfold just several days ago. Not clear, by the way, that this man they were going after was directly linked to the shopping mall attack, but said to be a major figure in the al-Shabaab network. What we know is that some type of firefight, major fight, erupted on the ground because the Navy SEALs had to leave the town in what they are calling, we are told, was a prudent move rather than continue to engage in this operation. There was some sort of risk, we are told, of killing some significant number of civilians, which they didn't want to do, of course. So where it stands right now is the SEALs don't know whether they were able to kill the man they were going after. They certainly didn't capture him. They don't know if he was killed because this firefight emerged and the SEALs decided to withdraw from the town. That is the language that is being used by the sources we're talking to, that the SEALs made the decision to withdraw. I think more information is certain to begin to arrive in the coming hours. We don't know, for example, to what extent the SEALs were moving through the village. Did they have to leave any of their equipment behind? Were they able to get back to either helicopters or small boats that they came in on? There's we want to be clear, there's no indication at this point of any SEALs wounded or killed in the incident. All indications are that they all got out of there. But we've talked about this a little bit earlier. When they go in on these very dangerous missions, their biggest issue it really is getting in as fast as they can and getting out as fast as they can. They are at significant risk the whole time they're on the ground. So when they practice for these missions, just as we saw in the raid to capture Osama bin Laden, you want to spend as little time on the ground as possible. The most important thing after you get in is to get out. Don?
All right, Barbara, sit tight for a second. I want to go now to our international correspondent, Nima Al-Bagir. She is in Nairobi, and you have extensive knowledge of Somalia. What do you know about the operations there? What can you tell us, Nima?
Well, Baraway is part of the remaining stronghold of al-Shabaab. It's in south-central Somalia. And it's interesting that Barbara is saying that the SEALs made a conscious decision to retreat rather than engage in a way that would injure more civilians, because Baraway is very much an al-Shabaab stronghold. This is their turf. These are very secured areas, and this is where most of the foreign fighters have been living for the last few years, and it's also where many of the major leadership of al-Shabaab have been living as they've been increasingly squeezed from both sides by both the Kenyan Defense Forces coming in from the south and the African Union forces coming in down from Mogadishu. So this is an area that is heavily guarded, heavily armed, and it's understandable that given as soon as the operation was seen to be compromised in some way, that the SEALs felt it was much easier to withdraw back over the sea, I'd imagine, because Baraway is a port town, rather than continue to engage on what is very much al-Shabaab's territory. Al-Shabaab have already, I mean, one of the things about al-Shabaab is out of all of the al-Qaeda franchises, they are the most wired. They are the most high profile on social media. On Already Done, we're seeing them taking to social media to talk about this. They've been posting pictures on an affiliate website that shows what they say is the equipment that the SEALs were forced to leave behind when, as al-Shabaab put it, they say they forced the SEALs' retreat. So we're seeing in these pictures, and we haven't managed to get them yet, but hopefully we'll get them for you on air soon. We're seeing US-made navigation, GPS devices. We're also seeing hand grenades that al-Shabaab are claiming were used as cover during the attack, and the kind of caliber bullets that are used in M16, which is the U.S. military assault rifle that's often carried in these kind of operations. So al-Shabaab, as you can imagine, are claiming this as a victory. But for the SEALs to even carry out this kind of an operation in an area that al-Shabaab would have perceived to be such a safe ground for them, I mean, al-Shabaab have to be feeling that tonight, Don.
All right, Nima, stand by. Don't go away, everyone.
This is CNN Breaking News.
The breaking news this hour on CNN is that there have been two big operations carried out across the ocean here. Breaking news on CNN. One is that a group that claimed responsibility for that deadly mall killing in Kenya. That U.S. Special Forces went on a mission in Somalia to take one of their leaders out. The other one is that a top al-Qaeda operative has also been taken out, or has been taken out. At least the first person, we're not sure. They went on a mission. The second person, the person in Africa here in Libya, has been taken out. So there are two major operations going on. We're talking about Abu Anas al-Libi. He has topped the most wanted list for years. In fact, he is the al-Qaeda operative believed responsible for the 1998 bombing of the U.S. embassies. Again, he may have been captured. CNN's Barbara Starr is our Pentagon correspondent. Barbara, update us on this story in Libya, please.
Hi, Don. Well, what I can tell you now is a senior U.S. official is telling CNN that al-Libi was captured and that it was indeed U.S. Special Operations personnel, a second mission in the last 24 hours, who conducted what he is calling a capture operation to get al-Libi, now in U.S. custody. My colleague Evan Perez confirming some of these details as well, saying it is now likely that al-Libi will be brought to the United States for prosecution in his alleged role in the 1998 bombings of the U.S. embassies in East Africa. They have brought other suspects to the United States in these similar matters to the federal court system in New York, which oversees these types of prosecutions. The introduction of U.S. Special Operations Forces on the ground in Libya is very significant because, of course, there is a functioning government there. It is not clear whether that government gave its permission or whether the U.S. forces, at the orders of the United States government, went in there completely covertly to capture this man without the permission of the host government of Libya. A lot of tension in the last year, of course, since the attack at the U.S. diplomatic compound in Benghazi, and the Libyan government publicly making it clear it didn't want any U.S. forces there. Al-Libi, though, as you see his picture there, the U.S. has had a $5 million reward on him as a major al-Qaeda operative in Libya, been there for some months and years now, said to have been, behind the movement to set up an al-Qaeda movement in Libya, probably to some extent not thought to be directly involved in that Benghazi attack, but more as an al-Qaeda operative in Libya, someone who fled there when al-Qaeda really went on the run in the last several years. And it goes to what we've been talking about, al-Qaeda morphing, dispersing itself, sending its people into other countries to establish new satellite organizations. It looks now tonight like U.S. Special Forces were able to get him. And again, we should be learning more in the coming hours exactly about where he may be moving next. Don?
Okay, so you're reporting now, Barbara, that he has been captured.
senior U.S. official tells me he has been, that he was captured by U.S. Special Forces in a capture mission. This is not an official announcement by the United States by any stretch. Evan and I, working the phones, talking to our sources, all indications are now that he is in U.S. custody and is somewhere overseas still at this hour.
All right, Barbara, stand by. Barbara, I'm going to need your help throughout the hour here on CNN. I want to get to our national security analyst now, Peter Bergen, to talk about both of these operations. Peter, why don't we start with Libya? In fact, if al-Libi has been captured, what does this mean for al-Qaeda in Libya?
Well, it's obviously not good news for them, but I mean, what will be interesting now, Don, to see is what happens with this guy. My guess is that relatively soon we will see him show up in the Southern District of New York to be arraigned. That's where he's been indicted. That indictment for his alleged involvement in the embassy bombing attacks has been there, since '98. He basically has, been on the run since before 9/11, and the Obama administration doesn't want to put anybody through the Guantanamo system. They want to use the federal courts. We saw, for instance, with Osama bin Laden's son-in-law, who was similarly picked up overseas, that shortly after he was captured, that he was arraigned in Manhattan, and he will stand trial there. And the federal court in Manhattan has a 100% conviction rate for terrorism offenses. Unsurprisingly, if you think about where the location is. So my guess is that this guy is going to have to get a pretty good defense lawyer.
I want to read some of the information that we're just getting in, Peter, from our international unit, and then you can comment on it. And if Barbara Starr is there as well, Barbara, feel free to comment. It is, and again, let me just tell you the breaking news here. There have been two major operations that have been carried out today by U.S. Special Forces, one in Somalia, one in Libya. They're going after top leaders of al-Qaeda and also a top leader of al-shabaab. Al-Shabaab, the one in Somalia, that is a group that's believed responsible for that attack on the mall in Kenya just a couple of weeks ago. The one that happened in Libya is Abu Anas al-Libi. He is the person who is believed responsible for the 1998 attacks on U.S. embassies. So, Peter, as we go along here, just reading from our international unit, a key al-Qaeda operative wanted for his role in the bombings of U.S. embassies in Africa in 1998 has been captured by U.S. Special Forces in Tripoli. Abu Anas al-Libi was grabbed from the Libyan capital, and these are new details, and what one of the officials described as a, quote, capture operation from the Libyan capital. The U.S. operation was conducted with the knowledge of the Libyan government. That's what a federal law enforcement official said. Talk us through that.
Well, that latter detail is very interesting because, obviously in the case of the Osama bin Laden raid, which was conducted in a Pakistani city and was a capture or kill operation, that was done without informing the Pakistani government, and it caused a huge amount of problems, for the already troubled U.S.-Pakistani relationship, that we hadn't sought their permission. After all, these are sovereign countries, and you're supposed to get permission to do these kinds of operations. And obviously, the bin Laden case was exceptional, but here you've got the U.S. government getting permission from the Libyan government, which is obviously a pretty fragile governing body at the moment, but nonetheless is the elected government of Libya, and that's the right thing to do. And it's interesting that was the approach that was taken.
So listen, Peter, we have been talking, Barbara, as so astutely pointed out, talked about the criticism of the attack and not being able to get the suspects in Benghazi, Libya. Here it is 15 years after the 1998 attack, some years after, and we're just now capturing this suspect. Would this lead people to believe that the criticism about Benghazi may be premature?
Well, there have been multiple people who have already been convicted in the '98 embassy attacks in the Southern District of New York, in Manhattan. That happened. 4 of them were convicted before 9/11. It was a pretty large conspiracy. Abu Anas al-Libi, the guy that has just been captured, played a role, an important sort of role, surveying the target and the like. So, justice, the United States, they don't forget about somebody who's involved in an attack that killed more than 200 people, mostly Africans, a dozen Americans, and they continue to, pursue the leads that exist to find people who've been indicted for these attacks. And so, I mean, when you think about Benghazi, that's a little over a year ago. President Obama has made it abundantly clear that justice will take place when it can happen.
I want to read a little bit more, Peter, to you from our international unit here and talk specifically about foreign policy and about protocol. As CNN was first to report back in September of 2012, a year ago, that al-Libi had been seen in Tripoli. That was according to Western intelligence sources. Sources said that there was concern that al-Libi may have been tasked with establishing an al-Qaeda network in Libya. So my question here, I'm getting to it, it's unclear whether Libya's government is aware of his presence. So what does that mean? What's the difference if Libya's government is aware or unaware of the presence of al-Libi?
Well, Libya is still a quite chaotic country, and the government doesn't really. It's not like the government of Switzerland. It's there are multiple militias, hundreds of militias that haven't entirely put their weapons down. There are al-Qaeda groups, or at least that sort of subscribe to the al-Qaeda ideology. There's the group that was behind the attack in Benghazi is called Ansar al-Sharia. It doesn't really call itself al-Qaeda, but it's a local jihadist group. So it's extremely plausible that the first time that the Libyan government, sort of found out that Libya really was in Tripoli was when they were informed by the U.S. government. On the other hand, they may also have known that he was there, and they've got bigger fish to fry, and that it's not the most important thing on their list of things to do. Because they've got to basically they have a real problem just controlling the country that they govern.
All right, Peter Bergen, thank you very much. Stand by. We're getting new information here by the minute on this breaking news here on CNN. Really, two breaking news stories. U.S. Special Forces carrying out two missions, one in Libya, one in Somalia today, going after top terrorists, lieutenants. And we are following that breaking news story here. Again, getting new information as we speak here on the air. We're going to regroup. We have correspondents who are in the region. Our national security analyst is on the line with us. Our Pentagon correspondent is here as well. We'll have new information for you on the other side of this break. The breaking news here on CNN. Two operations being carried out by U.S. Special Forces, one in Libya and one in Somalia, taking out, I believe in one of them, top lieutenant of al-Qaeda, and then the other one, the Special Forces went after a top lieutenant in al-shabaab. Not clear if they captured him. We're hearing that the forces in Somalia had to retreat. I want to get down to Jemana Karacha. She is on the line. She's joining me from Amman, Jordan. She has covered Libya over the years and is following the sentiment on the ground there, and she can speak to us about what is happening. So let's talk about Libya. Let's talk about al-Libi here. What is going on? What is the sentiment about his capture?
Well, first of all, Don, this news is starting to break in Libya now. For the past few hours, there were rumors circulating that this might have happened, but only now is it really circulating in Libya. We can see that on social media, and of course, there's a lot of concern from Libyans about what the repercussions are going to be if there's going to be any sort of retaliation. As you know, there are multiple Islamist extremist groups with affiliations to al-Qaeda that operate in Libya. They're concerned about what their reaction is going to be to this operation. Now, as for Libya, just a year ago, we spoke to some Libyan government officials. We did ask them if they knew that he was in Libya, because CNN at the time obtained exclusive reporting that al-Libi had returned to Libya somewhere between the end of the year 2010 and maybe the spring of the revolution there in 2011. But Libyan government officials said they were not aware of his presence in Libya, but we had heard at the time from Western intelligence officials that he had been cited in Tripoli, that he was not in hiding anywhere in Libya. Now, of course, a lot of concern right now, Don, about what this actually means. Did the Libyan government know about this? Did this happen with the consent of the Libyan government or not? Because the issue of sovereignty for this very weak, pro-Western Libyan government is a very, very sensitive issue. So, the next 24 hours are ones where we're going to have to see what the reaction is going to be on the ground in Tripoli.
All right. I want you to stand by, Jumana, and don't go away because I have more questions for you. But I want to bring in CNN's justice reporter, Evan Perez. You have been working this story on al-Libi all day. Talk to us about how this story came together.
Don, it's all day we've been hearing reports that there had been this capture in Tripoli. There was some sensitivity as to when we could report this, but we can now say that U.S. forces were the ones that grabbed him, and the issue is obviously he is wanted in New York for the involvement in the 1998 U.S. embassy bombings in Tanzania and in Kenya, and so the question has always been since the U.S. has known last year that he had suddenly arrived in Tripoli and was now essentially living out in the open. The question was always, when can they grab him? And I talked to an official today who told me that it was an opportune moment. They knew where he was, and they had the opportunity to grab him, and they did. So the question now is, when can they bring him to justice in the U.S.? There's a $5 million bounty on his head from the U.S. government for some years now, and the intent is to put him on trial.
Okay, Evan, stand by. I want to go back to Jumana. Jumana, you talked about whether or not the Libyan government knew that al-Libi was possibly there, that he may have come there as early as 2010. Our first report was back in 2012 that he was possibly there in Libya. What does this mean? What does it mean if we knew or not? What difference does it make, if the government knew about al-Libi being there or not?
Well, I think this is a big issue for Libya here, for this very fragile government, for its own credibility with its own people. Now, of course, when it comes to the West, there is the concern about this growing, a terrorism foothold that we're seeing in Libya after that attack in Benghazi last year that killed Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 other Americans. There has been a lot of concern about what sort of country Libya has turned into after the revolution. These al-Qaeda affiliated groups that seem to have established a presence in the country and are able to attack Western interests, Western targets in Libya, possibly outside the country. So there's been a lot of concern about that. And it's no surprise, really, if the Libyan government did not know that. They do have a lot on their plate. They are unable to really control the security situation in the country. And, one other thing that comes up, Dawn, has been the Benghazi list of suspects. There has been a list of suspects. The Libyans have not been able to detain any of those suspects who might have been involved in that attack on the U.S. consulate. Some of these suspects are out. They're free. CNN was able to sit down and talk to one of these suspects in Benghazi, yet the Libyan government is unable or is too weak to detain these. So a lot of questions about how much the Libyan government can actually do to control these groups and the terror threat coming out of that country.
Okay, Jumana, thank you very much. Don't go anywhere. I want to get back to Evan here, but again, I want to update our viewers that there have been 2 big operations that have been carried out by U.S. Special Forces, and it's very important to our fight against terrorism. One of them is in Somalia, where our U.S. Special Forces went up against a top lieutenant for al-shabaab. Al-shabaab is a group that's believed to carry out that attack on a Kenyan mall just a couple of weeks ago. The fighting was so intense, according to our Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr, that our Special Forces had to retreat and not exactly sure if they captured this top lieutenant. The other one was in Libya. Libya, the person there, the suspect there, is believed to be responsible for the 1998 bombings on U.S. embassies. So again, These are two operations that are played out. That is that suspect, Abu al-Libi, and he is believed to be captured. That's according to our reporting here. Evan, with these two operations playing out, you are in Washington. You are the justice correspondent there. What is the reaction likely to be from Washington, and how soon might we hear from someone in Washington?
Well, it's been a very tense day with different officials. They wanted to make sure these operations got off without and have the U.S. forces safely out of harm's way before they could even discuss any of this. And as I mentioned to you, we knew about him, and we were holding back on some of this. Barbara Starr was doing reporting, as was I today, and finally we were able to. Once we knew that there was nobody else in harm's way, we could go on air and say this. But this is, al-Libi is definitely a big one. Like I said, he has a $5 million bounty on his head. The U.S. has been wanting to have him, to bring him to justice here in the United States, and we're told that the Libyan government has been sensitive about this issue, but they were informed. I'm not sure how far ahead of time they were informed, but they were aware of this. This has nothing to do. Al-Libi was not believed to be involved at all in the Benghazi attacks, which obviously the U.S. is also looking for suspects in that case, and that one is a little more sensitive because the militias that the Libyan government depends on to help control Benghazi were obviously perhaps also involved in this. So that's a sensitivity. That's a separate one from the al-Libi situation.
All right, Evan, thank you very much. Stand by, Evan, stand by, Jumana, as well as our correspondents who are in the region there as well. We're following the breaking news here. Two major operations carried out by special forces overseas today. CNN will be back right after this break with more on this breaking news. All right, welcome back. For those of you who are just joining us, this is breaking news this hour. Two major U.S. military attacks in Africa. Here's what CNN has confirmed. U.S. Navy SEAL teams went on a mission in Somalia and tried to nab an al-shabaab leader possibly linked to that Kenya Mall attack. So the Navy SEALs had to withdraw because they were under fire in a Somali town. And we don't know exactly what happened to the al-shabaab leader. We're digging on that. Plus, we have this one as well. The al-Qaeda operative responsible for the 1998 bombings on U.S. embassies may have been captured as well. And Barbara Starr is reporting, she's saying, according to some very high sources that he has, his name is Abu Anas al-Libi. He was captured. Abu Anas al-Libi has been captured, and he has topped the most wanted lists for years. He joined al-Qaeda soon after its founding, and he is considered a senior member of al-Qaeda. We want to get to our Pentagon correspondent, Barbara Starr. She is following this as well. And so is our senior international correspondent, Nick Robertson. First to Barbara with the updated information. Barbara, what are you learning about both of these missions?
Well, what we know now is that al-Libi was captured by U.S. Special Operations Forces in Libya. Very significant for them. You can only imagine. They say that it was just an opportunity to grab him. Probably not. Probably this is someone who was under surveillance by intelligence services for some time. The question now in Libya will be the reaction of the Libyan people and ensuring that U.S. facilities and Western interests in Libya are secure if there is any adverse reaction on the Libyan street. That is going to be a significant issue in the coming hours. They will want to ensure that Western embassies are secure. It was the Russians, indeed, that came under attack in Tripoli earlier this week and took some of their people out of that facility. In Somalia, at the other end of Africa, essentially, U.S. Navy SEALs withdrew from this village. They did come under significant attack. We are told they made what they are calling a prudent decision to withdraw rather than risk civilian casualties. But make no mistake, where they went in Somalia is very rough territory. This is a stronghold of the al-Shabaab network. These people do not want to see foreign forces, let alone American forces on the ground. And I think, Don, it is an extraordinary irony, if you will. We are here on October 5th. Yesterday, October 4th, was the 20-year anniversary of the Black Hawk Down incident, the battle for Mogadishu, when so many U.S. forces lost their lives, and that became a very significant shadow on the U.S. military for so many years. But I think the other issue to contemplate is, why is all of this so important to Americans? Why are we talking about this in such detail tonight? It is the growth of al-Qaeda networks. These al-Qaeda networks from Libya to Syria, across North Africa, through the Horn, in places where there are not strong governments. Al-Qaeda movements are clearly on the rise, growing ability to attack Western targets, if not to launch attacks outside of Africa and into Europe or even America potentially. This is why it is so significant. This is why the U.S. and other intelligence services, other special forces units continue to go after these al-Qaeda targets. They are on the rise. Their ability to attack is not as diminished as the U.S. would like it to be, and that's a significant worry. Don?
Okay, Barbara, don't go anywhere. As you know, we are going to use you extensively here on CNN until we're done covering this story. I want to get to Nick Robertson. He is our senior international correspondent. He joins us now from London. Nick, I have a question for you. Again, and I want to reiterate, this is not CNN's reporting. There are reports that the operation in Somalia was unsuccessful. You heard Barbara saying that they had to retreat because there was so much firepower. But this is a stronghold for al-Shabaab. What does this mean, if anything, that at least U.S. Special Forces have been able to penetrate a seemingly stronghold of al-Shabaab?
Well, the first thing it seems to indicate is that there must have been good, accurate intelligence on at least the person that the operation was designed to capture or kill, depending on the circumstances. Perhaps the level of firepower coming back is an indication that that intelligence was incomplete, in so much as there wasn't a calculation on exactly how many operatives, al-Shabaab or otherwise, were there lying in wait. And the concern would also be about the possibility of a tip-off, a double agent, if you will, an entrapment type of situation. But this is already speculation at this time. But what it certainly indicates is that al-Shabaab, as it sort of got on the world stage a couple of weeks ago in Nairobi, is now being taken extremely seriously, and its growth and its bases of operation in Somalia are coming under increased scrutiny, and measures clearly being taken to limit that potential threat before it can grow bigger, before other plans can come into existence. A leading figure close to al-Shabaab was killed around Mogadishu in the past couple of years. On his body was found documents detailing specific attacks here in Britain, complex attacks similar to that in the Westgate shopping mall in Kenya. So this is an indication, really, that the threat that's been growing, if you will, under the radar to a degree in Somalia is now being confronted in a much more aggressive way, Don.
Let's talk now about Libya, if you will. Abu Anas al-Libi now has been captured and is now in custody in the U.S. custody, and will be perceivably brought back to the United States to face trial here.
And potentially provide a lot of valuable information, potentially, on his associates inside Libya, on the strength of al-Qaeda as it tries to grow in the north of Africa. We certainly are aware that there have been camps set up in the east of Libya in the past couple of years. This goes back to the period when he was first seen to resurface in Tripoli at least a year ago, potentially 2 years ago, just as Muammar Gaddafi was being overthrown. We know that the Islamists in Libya have been getting stronger. Connections, of course, to Mali, the attack that was witnessed in Algeria as well, killing several foreign nationals working at a gas plant there. So it's not only facing justice for the 1998 attack on Kenya and the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. Clearly, he may have useful information about the strength of al-Qaeda and the Islamists in Libya at this time. He is somebody who was senior within al-Qaeda. He was well respected, a good operative. He had lived for a while in Britain as recently as the year 2000. An apartment he was living in then was raided. Documents were found there, hundreds of pages, so-called the Manchester Manual. His apartment was raided in Manchester in England. These documents detailed how to attack embassies. He's believed to have fled back to Afghanistan at that time and possibly been sent by Ayman al-Zawahiri, the #1 at al-Qaeda, to go back with other individuals to Libya to set up camps and bases of operations. So all his recent years of activities are going to come under very, very close and important scrutiny, Don.
Nick Robertson in London. Nick, stand by. Don't go anywhere. I'll need you throughout the evening here on CNN as well. And for our viewers at home, this is breaking news this hour on CNN. 2 major U.S. military attacks in Africa. CNN has confirmed U.S. Navy SEALs team went on a mission in Somalia and tried to nab an al-shabaab leader possibly linked to that Kenya Mall attack. The Navy SEALs had to withdraw because they were under fire in a Somali town. So much firepower they had to withdraw. We do not know exactly what happened, and we don't know if the al-shabaab leader was actually captured. Plus this, the al-Qaeda operative responsible for the 1998 bombings on U.S. embassies may have been captured as well. His name is Abu Anas al-Libi. He has topped the most wanted list for years. He joined al-Qaeda soon after its founding and is considered a senior member of al-Qaeda. Our Pentagon correspondent will join us on the other side of the break, as well as our senior international correspondent, Nick Robertson, as well as correspondents who are in the region. Don't go anywhere. Short break. Two breaking news stories here on CNN. There have been 2 missions carried out overseas in our fight against terror. I want to get straight now to our Pentagon correspondent, Barbara Starr. Barbara, one of those missions was in Libya. The other one was in Somalia. Can you talk to me about the Somalian mission first? Because we're not exactly sure if the person they were going after, this high-ranking member of al-Shabaab, was captured.
That's exactly right, Don. The Navy SEAL team that went into this town in southern central Somalia made a decision to leave before they could confirm that they killed the man they were going after. They certainly did not capture him. And we are told that they made what they are calling the prudent decision to withdraw from the town because they did come into what they're calling a very hostile environment. They came under fire. It's not the case that a team of Navy SEALs is going to get overwhelmed. They are going to be able to deal with whatever they come up against, but they're going to make a prudent decision to withdraw rather than engage in extended fights where they're going to have to engage what they believe to be a civilian population, hostile as it may be, regular Somalis who live in the area. They don't want to get involved in that. They don't want to really get into that kind of situation. But I think it's important for people to understand when Navy SEALs went into this, when the special ops guys went into the situation in Libya, their tactics are such that they have plenty of backup firepower. There would have been aircraft circling overhead to engage in bombing runs to ensure their safety if they had to do that. There would have been other helicopters overhead to extract them, to get them out of there fast if it came to that. We know this because we know that that is how the bin Laden mission went. These are very standard tactics in these covert, high-risk operations that special operations undertake. So this would have all begun in both cases with potentially weeks, if not longer, of surveillance, gathering intelligence, learning about their targets, learning who was there, planning the operation, going in, having the backup power if they needed it, and then in the case of Somalia, making the decision that they were going to back out, they were going to get out of there, and they were going to get out fast rather than engaging in some extended combat operation. In Libya, it looks like they got al-Libi fairly quickly, and he now is in U.S. custody. Don?
Okay, Barbara, stand by. I want to bring in now CNN military analyst Lieutenant Colonel Rick Francona. Joining me now on the phone from Eugene, Oregon. You've been watching the breaking news play out here on CNN. Of course, you have sources within the government as well. Talk to me about this special forces group, about these Navy SEALs who are carrying out these missions.
Well, you know, this is a classic operation for them, and the raid in Somalia was perfect for them. It's on the coast. They can bring all sorts of air and sea power support, and Barbara's exactly right. They went in there with enough firepower to do what they needed to do. The prudent decision part is the commander on the ground making the call that this is going to result in a lot of unnecessary damage and civilian casualties. They wanted to go in there, do the job, kill or capture their target, and withdraw. Once the commander saw that that was probably not possible without killing a whole lot of people and doing a whole lot more damage than was necessary, he made the decision to withdraw. So we're not going to know the final result of this for some time. But this is what Navy SEALs do. This was a perfect mission for them, and it looks like the commander on the ground made the decision to pull back before having to inflict a lot more casualties than necessary.
You're talking about Somalia, but the picture we have up is the al-Qaeda operative who is believed to have been captured in Libya. Can you talk to me about the operation there and what this means for the fight against terrorism now that this person has been captured, presumably coming back to the United States and will face trial here?
Yeah, there's a whole lot of issues that this now raises. First of all, this is an excellent operation, and from what I'm told, this was a combination of FBI, CIA, and U.S. military forces doing a takedown in Tripoli. This was probably well done, well executed, and I would assume that there's a lot of cooperation from the Libyan government. And they're going to have to get him back to the United States, and now they're going to put him on trial. Now, this raises a lot of questions, Don. Is he going to be afforded all the rights of a U.S. citizen? Will he have access to legal counsel? What will his status be? Will we be allowed to interrogate him? Because I believe he's probably a gold mine of information, but how much of that are we going to be able to extract from him, under the U.S. legal system? So, this saga is just starting to unfold, but this is a major get for the intelligence community and the U.S. Special Operations community.
Okay. Can we go back to Libya now, Lieutenant?
Mm-hmm.
And
that was Libya. Yeah.
Let's talk about Libya now.
Okay.
I want how much are we going to lean on? I should say the U.S. government will lean on Libya to figure out if they knew al-Libi was there, and what does that mean? If the difference or not, whether or not they knew or not.
Well, I think that of course they knew, and I'm assuming from what I'm reading between the lines that we've been working with the Libyans for some time now, either in some surveillance capacity, intelligence gathering capacity, to the point where it was feasible to take him without too much of risk to civilian population. From what I understand, this was done in broad daylight. It was done very quickly, done very efficiently. That would indicate to me some cooperation from the Libyan government. I'm sure we're putting pressure on them, but they only have so much capability. That government is not very strong.
Mm-hmm. We were talking about, now I want to go back to Somalia, excuse me, that's what I meant earlier. When you're talking about made the decision to retreat because they didn't want to create more havoc or, kill more people and create more havoc than they had to. So my question to you is the same one I asked Nick Robertson. This is a stronghold of al-Shabaab. And the fact that they were able to get into this territory where it is presumably a stronghold, what does that say about the operations there?
Well, if you look at the location, this is Barawa, okay, and this is on the coast, about 250 miles up the coast from the border with Kenya. It's about 100 miles south of Mogadishu. So this is a coastal town. So once you have a coastal town, even if it's a stronghold of al-Shabaab, it is accessible to the U.S. Navy. The SEALs were able to come in there from the ocean, and this is why it was a classic SEAL operation.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel Rick Francona, joining us from Eugene, Oregon. Don't go anywhere. We're going to need you as well. Our Nick Robertson is our senior international correspondent. He is standing by on the other side of the break, as well as Jumana Karacha, who has been covering this region for quite some time. We're going to go to the region and get more information on this breaking news right after this break.